We're finishing up our day in Fairbanks with a visit to Gold Dredge 8. We start off with a train ride and an explanation of gold mining in Fairbanks.
The more experienced men knew there was gold here, but you got to dig deeper. The best gold deposits generally in that layer of gravel right above the bedrock. And here in the Fairbanks district, that presented a pretty good-sized challenge. Permafrost, soil frozen the year round. Maybe 10 or 12 guys centered around a steam boiler, as you see represented here. First you use the steam from the boiler to saw that vertical shaft all the way down to bedrock. They would follow the gold-bearing gravel, so they didn't necessarily go in a straight line. So they called this style of mining drift mining. That bucket what's hanging there, that's called a skip. And then the skip hoist, which would pull the skip from the bottom of the shaft onto the trolley line. As the skip gets to the winter dump, the dump is loaded of gold-bearing gravel, return quickly to the bottom of the shaft to be reloaded every winter day. That's right, they took advantage of the frost to hold the walls of their shaft. Now we're going to talk a little bit about this monster. Gold Dredge 8 is a real boat built in the Bethlehem shipyards, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, back in 1928. Anyway, the dredge was designed to do three things: chew up the gold-bearing gravel, sort out and hold on to the gold, and then dispose of the waste or tailings efficiently. We'll start with the business end, the bow of the boat, the digging ladder with what should be a continuous chain of buckets going all the way around. If you've been around Fairbanks at all, you know that those buckets are highly prized as a garden planter or for yard art. Bring about $5 a copy. So picture them filling with gravel, 6 cubic feet at a time, being carried to the top of the ladder. As they go around to the bottom, high pressure water, first washing that gravel out of the bucket and directing it down into a hopper. The water would carry the gravel into the upper stages of the trommel, giant drum like depicted right now. The big difference, if you go in and look at this one, it's nowhere near 100% screen. The first 10-15 feet are pre-wash, no screen at all. That gives the slurry a chance to mix the water and gravel so that you get the gold to drop down. The water would carry it through that screen and into the sluice box. The original riffle sets for Dredge 8, they were made of wood, and then they would put rubber on them for wear strips. So the heavier material will drop out below and behind each and every riffle. Now to hold that gold from washing out under the riffle is a matting. In those days they were using the mat from coconut fibers called a cocoa mat. Modern miners is more like extruded metal called miner's moss. About every 10 to 14 days they would call for a cleanup. The concentrates that they got out were put into lock boxes. Then that would go downtown Fairbanks where they had a retort furnace. And the idea there was to bring that metal up to 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. That would melt it. And then they would pour that metal into 700-ounce Troy bars called dory bars because they had other metal in with them. They weren't pure bullion yet. Because of the Federal Reserve Act, they were required to sell the gold to the federal government. They had put the postage on it, and that's right, they let the U.S. Post Office handle those gold bars going down to San Francisco Mint.
It seems like with any gold-related tour, panning gold seems to be included. And before that's the usual demonstration. But here I've never seen anyone do it with such precision.
The water is what we're going to use to wash the gold off of the dirt. So we add water, and then we want to mix the water with the gravel, and you should be able to hear that grinding. That's your first clue everything's going just right. That is moving the gold, mixing with the water, making the slurry, That moves the gold to the bottom of the pan. Then we shake and tip the pan. The gold is going to slide across the bottom. Gravity and the water are going to pull that gold down into the deepest part of the pan, that crevice, the gold trap. The gold is under that little puddle of dirt. We settle the dirt on one side. Use the water to move the gravel to the other side. When you're done, all that should be left in your pan, nice, clean, good gold.
So now it's time to see if our skills have improved. As before, it was a big help to pan a second pan with the dirt left by the others in the trough. The tour concluded with a talk about the Alaskan pipeline.
In 1968, about 440 miles to my right or north, at Prudhoe Bay on the Arctic Ocean, the little tiny Atlantic Richfield Oil Company got on a huge deposit of crude oil. They then formed a consortium with the other oil companies that had an interest in moving an estimated 8 billion barrels of oil to market. They borrowed the name Alaska from the Inuit native language. It means great land. Wherever this pipeline is elevated, there's a soil condition and a consequence. Start with the consequence. The elevated pipeline has to deal with thermal expansion. Between the coldest day in the winter and the hottest day in summer, pipeline needs to be able to grow and shrink about 6 inches. That little bit of movement is accomplished with the vertical support members that have a crossbar and a sliding shoe, and you add the zigzag design that allows the pipe to move ever so little to accommodate the thermal expansion and contraction. So that cleaning pick, which is propelled by the oil, they put one of them in every maybe 10 days to 2 weeks, and that scrapes the oil off the walls, stores it inside, generally makes it all the way down to Valdez. They clean it out, put it on the truck, take it back. Now there's another device, and that is called a smart pick, and that was designed to check for problems from the inside of the pipe out. We don't think of oil as being abrasive, but crude oil does have salt water and sand, and indeed on the inside corners it was wearing thin. So a fix was needed. A fix was found, and for most of the summer in 1997 the pipeline was shut down, and the above ground sections, which is where it zigzags, so that's where the problems were at, and internal sleeve was applied. Obviously a very good fix, because here we are 46 years into a 20-year pipeline that was supposed to bring 8 billion barrels of oil to market, and at the end of last year's shipping season, this pipeline has transported 16 billion barrels of Alaskan oil down to the United States for our own consumption.
That evening we had dinner at the creperie, where we had an egg, reindeer, and mushroom crepe. The next morning we're up early, with bags out by 5:30 to catch a 10 o'clock flight. Our group of 37 has the whole 737 to ourselves. We're heading to Dawson City on the banks of the Yukon River. The air was thick with smoke, as the wildfires in the area grew worse. Customs in such a small airport was a breeze, and we were soon in downtown Dawson City. After getting some fish and chips at Sourdough Joe's, we spent some time exploring the town. The city of Dawson, its official name, was the center of the Klondike gold rush of the 1890s, when its current population of about 1,600 soared to close to 17,000. Our guide is Elena, and she takes us to a number of historic buildings that have been restored and aren't open to the general public.
This is the original location, but not the original building for the Bank of British North America. The original building was just a wall tent with a false front on it. I didn't know this until very recently. When you go to frontier towns, all the buildings have false fronts on them. The reason for that was sometimes boom towns didn't pan out. It didn't make economic sense for you to build the whole building right away. So you would just put up a very elegant looking false front, and people would walk through the door of that false front and be in a wall tent. And of course, once the town proved out, once it had staying power, they would erect the other 3 walls. Of course, sex work and brothels are always tolerated in Dawson City. A necessary evil to keep the rigors and the tensions of minors in their proper channel. And indeed, if you read newspapers from this era, you can read mothers saying that they're very happy to have a well-run brothel in town because it keeps minors away from their daughters. And I think that some of the women that came up here found a town very much aspiring towards Victorian class systems. It was not thought of as proper for an unaccompanied woman in Dawson to work in a store or to wait tables. So survival was pretty difficult, and a lot of women found that their only options for employment were to work in as a dance hall girl or to work in a brothel. When Parks Canada picks up the Red Feather Saloon in the 1950s, it looks like this. You can see that it's built right onto the ground. That's a big no-no for construction in Dawson City, because if you build your building right onto the ground and then you heat it in the winter, the heat is going to radiate downwards and melt that layer of permafrost beneath you, and your building is going to start to sink. So one of the first things Parks Canada would have done with this building is put it up on cribbing. You'll notice that most of the buildings here are on cribbing here. That allows cool air to circulate underneath and mitigates for melting permafrost. It mitigates it, but does not completely solve the problem of melting permafrost. It gets hot here, the permafrost melts naturally. And my house is up on cribbing, but every 5-10 years I'll be making a salad in my kitchen and I drop a cherry tomato on the floor and it rolls one way. That's when I know I need to level my house. I call a guy named Donnie Flynn over. He comes over with an actual car jack. He jacks up one side of my house, puts a shim underneath it, and it'll stay level for another 5 or 10 years. So Parks Canada doesn't get around to renovating the interior of the Red Feather until the 1990s. And when they do it, they really are quite meticulous about it. This was called the Hub Saloon at some point. It's very, very common for the historic buildings in this region to have had several lives, because it's just so much cheaper to buy an old building, even if it's run down, than it is to build the whole thing from scratch.
That evening we spent at Diamond Tooth Gerties, enjoying the fun shows and the tasty Okanagan pear cider. Today we're on a tour of Gold Bottom Mine. Brenda, our guide, first explains how gold mining claims work.
Okay, so we're standing right here, and as you may have already guessed, all of these are claims. A claim is not title ground. It doesn't give you the right to live there. It only gives you the right to extract placer gold, because these are placer claims, okay? Now, placer means loose, and that means that our gold is already separated from the rock. Now, there's 3 ways to obtain a claim. You can stake one. So to stake a claim, you literally build a post such as this one. There's like guidelines to do so. Very easy. There's always the same. This is to also to stay cohesive with nature. So we still put posts like this. You name the first one post number 1. You label it 500 feet unless you're a discovery claim, and then you put 1500. Then you put the date, your name, and a nickname. Then let's say we're gonna stake this one, right? So this one is empty. I can go put my post number 1 here. Measure with GPS the 500 feet. Put the post number 2. So I close, and that marks my area. Now, the date is important because from this date, I'm going to have 10 days to go to the registry office, pay the $10, and then seal the deal. So that means that I'm going to have that claim for 1 year. Now, are you guys older than 18? So then you're already qualified to get a claim, because that's the only requirement that the government asks. They don't care about your ID. They don't care where you're coming from, as long as you're older than 18. The government is smart. They want us to stake claims, they want us to buy claims, they want us to mine it, because if we do, and if we profit, and if we sell the gold, they get the royalties, right? Which is 2.5%. Now, the last thing we need to do after we get a claim, which is very important, is the water license, right? So we must obtain a water license, and that is what nowadays is creating a lot of problems because it takes up to 2 years to get the water license. There's 3 steps for miners. The first one is gold stripping. This is where we spend 90% of our summer, and that is the action of getting rid of the trees, the moss, and all of the overburden, such as the permafrost. The second step is loosing. So that's the action of combining water, gravity, and agitation in order to wash off all of our dirt so we can separate the gold from the gravel. So I believe that he's going to bring all of that overburden into an area where we can work on our reclamation. So what's reclamation? When I'm digging a hole all the way up to bedrock, this could be 20, 30, 40 feet. All that dirt that I put out to get to my pay dirt, I want to try to put it back on that hole, or in a way that it looks cohesive and natural with the landscape. We started doing this approximately in the 90s, which explains why some of the tailings are still out there, because we did not do reclamation back in the day, especially not at the time of the gold rush. Then another thing that miners do is try to buy equipment in pairs if they can. If you can't have pairs whenever something breaks, at least you can use it for parts and keep going. We need diesel, which is expensive. I have a fuel truck there that costs David between $14,000 to $19,000 every 2 weeks to fill up. At the plant, below the trommel, I have mats such as this one, which is where I trap all those little tiny pieces of gold. So in order to do a cleanup, I need always a source of water. And in this case, I'm going to hook up my hose to the pump. This is a long tom. This is exactly what we have below the trommel. And on top of the mats, I always have expanded metal. What's going to happen is that whenever I put this on an angle and then have water running, it creates a vortex effect. So that vortex effect is my agitation, is how I'm going to help myself to get rid of all the light material. Bring my pay dirt inside, scoop by scoop. The gold always falls first, right away, doesn't go too far, and then the gravel chup, 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 keeps jumping all the way until the end. So all I do is just drop the gold on the wheel, on the gold genie. So what happens here is that you have the illusion that the gold is going up, but in fact the gold is going nowhere. It's just staying on the crack of the spirally shaped gold pan because it's too heavy, right? It can't jump out. Now the gravel is light enough to constantly jump out at the bottom. So this is a very efficient way for me to open my can of beer, look how that gold genie does the hard work, and then I can hopefully celebrate that I found a lot of gold. Every single one of those flakes is not gold, actually. It's gold and silver. So our purity, and this is going to vary depending on which valley and creek you are, which river, but consistently we have been having gold on Hunker Creek and Gold Bottom of 84% purity. So every single one of those flakes is 84% pure. Now, what's going to happen here? I'm going to sell this gold. Now, I could bring the flakes as they are to the broker. He's going to charge me a commission for melting it, but because I do have the tools, or David does, he's going to melt the gold himself. So all the flakes that he finds on his cleanup, he puts them on a container such as this one. He puts it on a tiny oven at 2,000 Fahrenheit degrees. Let the gold melt. Once that is melting, he drops it on an iron cast and then lets it cool off and brings that dory bar to the broker.
After donning some boots, we were each given a pan of pay dirt, of course spiked with a pinch of gold. The total gold we recovered from the trip was 0.03 ounces, worth about $40. Today we're traveling to Whitehorse. Our plane is scheduled to leave at about 12:40, but due to the fires, it kept getting pushed back, finally leaving at 3:15. Losing most of the day, we only had enough time to take a quick little walking tour along the Yukon River. The next morning we had a nice breakfast at the Burnt Toast Cafe before boarding our bus toward Caribou Crossing. On our way, we stopped at Miles Canyon to take in the scenic view. Another sightseeing stop was at Emerald Lake. The lake gets its color from the light reflecting off a calcium carbonate clay called marl that has been deposited on the lake's floor. Finally arriving at Caribou Crossing, we had a barbecued chicken lunch with baked potato, coleslaw, and fresh-made donuts. Overall, the place didn't look very impressive until we got to the wildlife gallery. Another thing we came away with from Caribou Crossing was one of our new favorite drinks, the Sweet Beaver. By 3:30 we were in the air again, heading toward Vancouver, being served fresh sandwiches, drinks, and hot chocolate chip cookies. Holland America has us staying at the Fairmont Hotel at the Vancouver airport before our flight home tomorrow. Our flight didn't leave until 3, so we didn't check out until noon. Overall, the trip really wasn't quite what we expected, but we did see a lot of things you can only experience in this unique area.